Someone's done a very nice sketch of what all the different HS2 proposals look like. HS2 services will look like. You can imagine you've got HS2 coming down like this into Euston. There's Euston. Let's just draw a box for Euston. So we've got, bearing in mind the current it looked like this, and then we have Euston here, and then the current plan was for this to be the link, right? That was the HS1 HS2 link to do that, which means that any service kind of coming on and wanting to go off to the European mainland. So doing that, it's skipping the central London station. So that means that you're of the 18-ish, the aspirational and pretty much confirmed as not possible now, because they've pretty much definitely limited Euston to 10 platforms, so which is like a massive sort of moment. But anyway, so that's the current proposals. So the issue with that is that so you have to pick. So if there's going to be 3 trains an hour, how many of these services are you then scratching the central London connection for, right? How many? Because for every time you do that, you're diminishing the usefulness of that service, which means people might not catch it, which means they can't hop onto another train, or you're diminishing the potential release capacity benefits in the existing railway network if that means that you aren't justifying, you've not got enough capacity to stop the service, to move those long distance non-stop services off, for example, the East Coast Main Line. So this is bad. So then the other option is, right, okay, well, do the link this way then. So different design, none of the proposals looked at this, but actually you do the link this way, and they run in here, and then they reverse, and then they come back out. So they come in, and then they reverse, and then they come back out. Hooray. Well, the issue with that is that would mean that you're doubly clogging up the station throat at Euston, which would have pretty much the same effect. You'd be reducing capacity, you wouldn't manage the 18 trains per hour, so that would be canned off. And once again, you're diminishing the capacity of HS2. So anything that involves a terminal Euston and a connection from the north is bad. It can't work. It can't work operationally. This kind of begs the question, then, what is a good idea, right? What is a good idea? What might a better proposal look like? Well, let's look to the past, because, and I'm going to use some Foster and Partners slides. Here is a picture from the olden days. Here's the old concourse of King's Cross that was temporary and was very much not untemporaried. Here's where the new kind of umbrella thing is. And here's a load of things that are now turned into more development-y stuff and many shiny developments. And this is pretty much what was originally going to be used to pay for the new connecting station here, as well as paying for the rest of the Channel Tunnel rail link. It was all this oversight development. Now, oversight development, which is a curse that Euston is currently having to deal with anyway, although Lend-Lease are pissed off with the latest announcement from government because it's diminished the amount that they can do overly. Abolish Lend-Lease. You suck, Lend-Lease. I hate you. Anyway, hate is a strong word, but I do think Lend-Lease is stupid, and I want Lend-Lease to collapse and not exist because they drive oversight development and make our stations pants. But on that subject, if you're going to do, the right solution is press button. No, what? Oh, wait a minute. I've got slides in the wrong order. Bear with me a second. That should be there. There, I fixed it. Right, good. Have I managed to do that? That's exciting. Sorry, we're jumping to... You know how these things go. Let me get OBS back up so I know what's going on. Right, we're jumping to the 23rd of July 1987 because all the things I was just explaining, the Channel Tunnel Act 1987, which enacted construction of the Channel Tunnel, involved lots of silly ideas about private finance, which resulted in British Rail having to use all this oversight development to fund the Channel Tunnel rail link, which was not allowed to be funded by state funds, stupidly, because, Thatcherism and neoliberalism and nonsense economics, which resulted in these proposals. With this thing here, this funny, classic Norman Foster weirdo tent here, plus all this oversight development that kind of obviously looks quite different now, and they demolished a lot more than, I'm glad to say they repurposed rather than demolishing. If you remember all those buildings that still exist, thankfully, as part of the kind of coal drops development, they were all being demolished as part of the Foster and Partner plans. So here's King's Cross, there's King's Cross, here is St Pancras, there's St Pancras, and here is the Triangle of Destiny, which is this. These are the 3 slides from which I'm going to show more pictures of kind of explaining. But this kind of shows what the arrangement is that I'm talking about, because what we have is, there's the East Coast Main Line, here is the Midland Main Line, and here is, we have Europe going this way. So there's the Europe and the Channel Tunnel, and in this direction, I don't know why I did the arrow that way. In this direction, we have the rest of Britain. It's this way. Deliberate spelling mistake. There's Britain that way. Basically, an enabler for a through connection northwards. The station for the Channel Tunnel was going to be a through station. These were the original plans for the connection, the Channel Tunnel rail link. The original plans were for a through station here. This is what it should have always blinking well looked like. Here's a very pixely picture with people in it, showing kind of again what this thing would look like. There's this sort of tenting thing, but anyway, sorry, look at this. So you can see. Also notice, by the way, this would have included Thameslink services that might have made use of the through station. So the low level station here, this wasn't just for international services, but it was also for Thameslink 2000, because you can see Network Southeast bridges. So there's this kind of enabler to connect up to King's Cross for the. So for those Thameslink services, you've got the ticket hall here, and there's the St Pancras platform, and you can see this is the international arrivals and departures bit. So so this side actually is the international side, and then there's a bit of NNC side kind of here and here. So that kind of all makes some sense. Here are some nice high-resolution pictures of what that would have looked like that seem to exclude the rest of Britain, but anyway, or the rest of London. But you can sort of see this is the classic Foster's high-tech thing. I'm not a huge fan of high-tech architecture, to be honest. I think it's a bit stupid. The issue with this is that they'd have demolished quite a lot of London, to this part of London, to build it, including some very nice buildings. We might have done it slightly differently nowadays without quite as much demolition, but in the late 80s, early 90s, we were a bit more gung-ho on such things. Here's a nice picture from above, kind of showing how it fits. So it would have involved quite a lot of demolition in this direction here, this proposal. But the idea is that you have the light coming down into the station concourse here with the through platforms underneath. It would become a Hauptbahnhof. It would indeed become what you've all been suggesting and saying is a good idea. Donald Brannigan and lots of people, okay, everyone needs to stop saying you'd have to segregate international domestic passengers. They don't do that in Europe on the mainland. So why, if we're thinking long-term aspiration, would we not be doing, why is that an issue in the UK? I'm talking about long-term future aspirations. At this point, the aspirations were that that this would all kind of work out in the wash, that the Schengen would kind of maybe be an inevitability. We were getting closer to the idea, bearing in mind there's a lot of Eurosceptics in government at the time, there was still the idea that it was closer union and this would kind of work. But now, I'm assuming that we've got rid of this idea that Britain needs to somehow be kind of split and separate and away from the rest of Europe. So it's a bad excuse. As I say, it's an excuse, not a reason. Lack of customs facilities is an excuse, not a reason. We don't need to have customs facilities. I mean, we do now because Brexit and blah, blah, blah. But in terms of long term, those planning for the future, what I want, we wouldn't care about customs facilities. We'd just, do Schengen. They also made an actual real physical model, a really nice physical model with lots of layers and all sorts, explaining how everything fits together, which was in the BR offices, I think, or was it? Or maybe it was in the offices. I think it was somewhere anyway. Trevor Stone took these pictures, and he took these pictures of the model, and I think it's really nice to just look at the model. Not least is there's some nice classic TGVs in there. With their terrible interiors, as I recently found out. And you can sort of see how much demolition was going on to build this thing, because they were talking about this being kind of cut and cover construction. So everywhere that's underneath this thing was massive excavation, right? This is King's Cross here, so you can see how it cuts through King's Cross. So at this point, I presume it would be kind of very careful excavation to not. But here, at this point over here, it was kind of cut and then cover. Again, here we've got more pictures showing where kind of more of the work, more of the demolitions that are required to make it work. What else we got? We've got there's King's Cross again, and showing how it cuts through underneath, and also some of the connections in terms of concourse here. And then this is the connections for the Thameslink services. There actually is that a model. Is there a model? You can sort of possibly see what model here of what the Thameslink Thameslink platforms might have been. You can see some nice Class 91s. Or actually, they're DVTs there, but anyway, looking very nice too. And then platforms down into the station. There's St Pancras, very familiar, lovely. So there's St P. Looking very nice model. Is that sitting on the table with the kind of the other bits underneath the top of the model? There's the King's Cross bit of the model from earlier that's clearly been taken off and put on the floor. And here's a nice picture of St P as well, looking big. It is very grand. Now, this man here, this person is one of the people singularly responsible. Well, he's not really. He lobbied very hard against this because it was causing a lot of damage in his constituency. And to be fair, the plans were a pretty blunt instrument. Like, they could have been fettled quite a lot and avoided a lot of the damage locally. So to be honest, I think I can understand the opposition, just as I can kind of understand people opposing it opposing HS2 in Camden for similar reasons. Although you can see by the difference in scale it's less of a blunt instrument, although they are demolishing quite a lot. So yeah, anyway. And actually, really, it wasn't necessarily Corbyn, because by March 1992, this had all gone. Why? The main reason is the early 90s recession, because it bludgeoned Olympia and York, or is it York and Olympia, on the back of the head. They went bust, and they, who were the original owners of Canary Wharf, they were going to be the major investors for all that new asset that was going, all the new oversight development, all the new construction that was going to happen in the railway to kind of land north of King's Cross. The redevelopment at the time was going to be done by Olympia and York. They went bust as a result of the early 90s recession. And that kind of meant that the oversight development thing fell through, which meant that the funding for that whole project collapsed. And also the interest in regional Eurostar had collapsed by that point. You know, it was already starting to tumble. The regional Eurostar thing hadn't collapsed by that point. The government were still talking about it as being a real thing, but I think behind closed doors that was already being undermined by cheap flights. There you go. So by March 1992, it was gone. It was kaputski. That was the end of that. And so that is kind of, to be honest, what the ideal through station would have looked like. It would have looked like those plans. Those original plans were the best ones, although fettled, I dare say. Will there ever be a direct link to the European mainland? I hope so. I got a fairly short answer to this. It's like, yeah, I really do hope that there will be a direct link from places outside of London to the European mainland. However, I don't think that the pedestrian path and connection is so bad. It's not a disaster. It's kind of like just an airport connection, which isn't the end of the world. But I do think that a through connection is a good idea, because having just travelled across Europe, it is annoying it is an annoyance to change. It's not the end of the world, but it is an annoyance. And it would be nice to have connections. You know, imagine catching a train from, you know, Manchester to Rome. It'd be awesome. It would be really cool to do that. It would decrease some of that power that London has. You know, it would people often, London becomes a destination for that. I think it'd be a good idea.